The wind carried a lonely sound across the dry grasslands, a slow cry that seemed to rise from the earth itself like a warning whispered from ancient spirits. The sky hung low with copper-colored clouds, and the sun burned like a dying ember on the far side of the horizon, where rugged mountains cut the distance with sharp blue lines. A wounded cowboy lay near a shallow creek, his breath rough and painful, his shirt torn by brush and sharp rock, while his hat rested a few feet away in the dirt. He tried to move, but his back felt stiff, and his legs felt heavy as if the ground claimed him little by little. He believed he was alone in the wild land, and he feared he would not see morning again. He did not know that eyes were already watching him from behind the tall desert grass, silent like shadows born from earth and fire. 3 Apache women stood at a distance with bows ready and long braided hair moving with the wind. They lived not far away near the hidden side of the mesa, where their small lodge sat close to thick oak trees and quiet spring water. They had been walking back with gathered roots, herbs, and small game when they saw the cowboy lying near the creek with blood on his vest and dirt across his face. Their tribe followed strong rules about strangers, especially wounded men who came from ranch lands where settlers began to spread. Still, they were taught that life was sacred and that a wounded soul belonged to the spirits before it belonged to any nation or tribe. They were cautious but curious, and they argued in soft tones about what to do. The cowboy did not know where he was anymore. He had been riding across cattle land when riders chased him, accusing him of stealing horses he never touched. He tried to explain, but the words did not reach their ears because anger can close the mind tighter than iron shackles. He managed to escape, but his horse got startled by a loud shot, and he fell down a rocky hill. With every movement, pain spread through his bones, and he barely had enough strength to breathe. He thought maybe coyotes were near, or maybe it was his time, and he whispered a short prayer, as if the land itself might hear it. The 3 Apache women watched his lips move, and noticed how weak his body looked. One believed he was a trap sent by others. Another felt pity, thinking no man should die slowly alone in the wilderness, where no hand could hold his last breath. The third studied his face and saw fear in his eyes, mixed with a strange calm, like a man who stopped fighting fate. The wind turned warmer for a moment, as if it wanted to guide their choice. They stepped closer, each careful with every footstep. And the cowboy slowly raised his hand, not as a threat, but as a silent answer, that he was helpless and meant no harm. Their voices were quiet but sharp as they questioned him, trying to understand his story. He struggled to speak and told them he was not a thief or scout. His voice cracked, and he asked only for water so he could stay alive long enough to prove his truth. They saw how dry his lips were, and how sweat mixed with dust on his brow. After some silent thinking, they lowered their bows. They still had mistrust in their hearts, but their tribe did not believe in letting a helpless man die without trial of spirit. They gave him a small drink and helped him lift slightly so he could breathe easier. He felt grateful, yet frightened, because he knew that trust between Apache people and cowboys was thin as deer hides stretched under fire. Still, this was his only hope. He had no strength to ride and no family nearby, and he feared that riders who chased him might look for him again. The women told him that by tribal rule, if they brought him into their lodge alive, he would be under sacred protection, but also under sacred law. The land had rules even those born outside must follow. He did not understand what that meant yet, but his mind was too weak to question it. They carefully made a stretcher using strong branches and deer-hide rope they carried. The cowboy winced each time the stretcher moved, but he knew it was his only chance. The sky grew darker and coyotes began to howl somewhere between rocks and cactus shadows. The journey to the hidden lodge felt long and rough. His vision blurred many times, and he thought he heard drumming far away, though maybe it was just his heartbeat echoing inside his skull. When they reached their lodge, the women burned sage and whispered ancient words for safety from spirits that could follow wounded souls. They placed him near the inner side of the warm lodge and covered him with a fur blanket, so his blood would not freeze in the night air. The 3 women discussed what must happen next, because a man taken in such condition fell under sacred law. A man rescued by unmarried Apache women had to be bonded by custom, so no spirit or outsider could claim him or take power over those who saved his breath. Each of them understood that if he lived, the council would see him as bound to them by life law, tied not by force, but by spirit duty. A man healed by their hands would be seen as chosen by the land, not by his own decision. They did not know if he would accept their law or curse it once he gained strength. Inside the warm lodge, Cowboy opened his eyes a little and watched the shadow of the women move near the fire. He did not understand their language fully, but he sensed seriousness in their tone and felt that his fate was changing fast. He wondered if they would send him back to ranch towns once he recovered, or if he would become some kind of prisoner. His fear grew, but there was something calm in the smell of herbs burning around him. His breath steadied, and he felt strange safety in a place he had never seen before. He studied the three women. One had strong eyes like mountain cliff stone, one looked gentle like soft morning water. And the youngest seemed brave, though her hands trembled a little when they came close to him. They looked different from any women he had known in ranch towns, where dresses were stiff and eyes were full of fear of the unknown. These women belonged to nature like deer, rain, and thunder. He wanted to ask them about the sacred law they whispered about, but his voice failed him again. He felt weak and confused, but he could sense that his story was no longer his alone. The land and these three Apache women now shared his fate. Night settled outside with no moon to guide the sky. Coyotes cried again, and the wind swirled against the walls of the lodge. The women laid out herbs, guarded the fire, and spoke of what sunrise might bring. They needed to call a tribal elder at dawn to decide what to do, and once the rule was spoken, nobody could run from it. The cowboy closed his eyes and tried to rest, but worry filled his chest like a heavy stone. When morning came, he would learn why they kept repeating that he now belonged to their law, and that a wounded man saved by three Apache women was no longer just a stranger. He was now tied to something deeper, and once the council settled the matter, his life would never return to the world he knew before. The fire inside the lodge hissed softly as damp, but settled into glowing shapes. Smoke circled upward through the small opening at the top, carrying a strong mix of sage and pine. The cowboy lay still, trying to understand where he was and what was coming next. His mind drifted in and out of memory while he listened to the women move around him with quiet footsteps. They worked with purpose, not panic, as if they had seen many wounded people before. Every time he tried to rise on his elbow, a long, heavy pain pulled him back down. He was used to hard ranch work, cattle drives, and broken bones from rough horses, but this felt deeper, like the earth itself had grabbed hold of him and would not let go until it was ready. The oldest woman, with calm, steady eyes, prepared crushed roots in a leather bowl. She told him in slow, broken English to breathe steady and trust the earth medicine. She pressed warm cloths on his ribs and checked his shoulder where sharp rock had scraped deep. He tried to speak a full sentence, but it came out thin. He managed to say he had been accused without proof. The youngest woman leaned in to hear him better, trying to understand every word, while the middle one kept guard near the door flap, peering out into the night as though danger might approach at any moment. Outside the lodge, the land stretched wide with rough hills and red soil. The women belonged to a small Apache band that moved often to stay hidden from both military patrols and settlers, who pushed deeper every season. Their people believed nature was their first family, and that survival came from honoring earth spirits, not from building fences or claiming ownership. The cowboy came from a world where land was measured with stakes hammered in straight lines, and where men boasted about cattle count and gun skills. Two different paths had crossed in one silent night, and now both sides faced a choice. Never planned for, the cowboy drifted into sleep, and woke again when the cold, early dawn wind slipped through the opening. He heard the women speaking softly in their native tongue. Their voices carried mixed feelings. The youngest sounded scared and emotional, wondering if helping him would bring trouble. The middle one spoke firmly, saying that a decision must be made through tradition, not fear. The oldest reminded them that they acted with honor by saving a life, and that any consequence must be faced with head held high. The cowboy listened without fully understanding, yet he felt the weight behind every word. He tried to raise his head, but the oldest woman gently pushed him back to rest, telling him that sunrise would bring answers. She pointed to the fire and told him that where there was warmth, there was still breath. He respected her strength and felt a strange trust forming, though he barely knew their names or history. She told him that each of them had lost family in different ways. The youngest lost her brother to a harsh winter, when food ran low. The middle one survived an attack that scattered their people. The oldest spoke of how peace was always spoken of, but never truly given. Their words were not filled with hate, only tired truth, as daylight began to spread through the trees. The lodge door opened, and a young boy entered, carrying water in a clay bowl. He seemed to be a helper or runner for the elder who would be called soon. He placed the bowl near the cowboy with a shy glance. The women looked at each other, understanding that time was running short. Once sunrise touched the sacred carving rock near their village, the elder would arrive to hear their story. Tribal law was not written with ink. It was carried in spoken memory, taught by fire circles and winter nights. They believed decisions made through ancient law lasted longer than any promise signed on paper. The cowboy thought about the life he left behind. He had worked at a ranch near trade routes where cowhands passed through with stories of danger and gold. He dreamed of buying his own land someday, not big, but enough to raise horses in peace. When he was accused of stealing, he ran because he feared what angry men might do without listening. Now lying wound-bound inside an Apache lodge, he wondered if fate had shifted him toward a different purpose. He looked at the three women and felt they were not just strangers. They were tied into his story by something deeper than accident. Soon steps were heard outside. A group approached, and the lodge flap moved aside. An elder entered, wrapped in a long woven blanket with symbols stitched like stars. His face held lines of wisdom shaped by the seasons. He studied the cowboy with serious eyes, then turned to the three women and asked them to explain. They spoke for a long time, telling every detail, including how they found him and the promise they made to protect life. The elder listened without interrupting, then nodded slowly. He explained that when three unmarried women saved a man together, their spirits became linked to his survival. The law existed to protect honor, family, and balance, so that no woman would be shamed for helping a man, and no man would misuse their kindness. If the cowboy lived, he would be under their protection and expected to respect them with loyalty. It did not mean chains or force. It meant shared responsibility. The cowboy did not fully grasp the full meaning, but understood it was not a small matter. He tried to sit up, wanting to show strength, but his chest burned with pain. The elder placed a hand near his shoulder and told him not to fight the body, only to fight fear. The cowboy said he was grateful for their care and that he never asked to be trouble. The elder answered that sometimes the land chooses paths that humans do not choose for themselves. What mattered now was truth, respect, and healing. The women listened carefully, each feeling a different storm inside. The youngest worried about what others in the band might whisper. The middle wondered if bringing him in would bring soldiers searching. The oldest believed his arrival had reason beyond injury. She asked the elder what they must do next. He said the cowboy must stay in their lodge until he healed enough to walk. During that time, his character would be watched. If he showed respect and honesty, he would be welcomed and allowed to speak his heart. When final decision day came, the cowboy agreed because there was no other choice. Even if he wanted to run, his body would not carry him anywhere. He hoped those who chased him would not find the hidden lodge. He prayed that the truth about the horse theft would someday be cleared. He worried that his presence would put these women in danger, but he had no power to change his situation besides showing kindness and honesty. The elder left, leaving the women alone with their thoughts. They prepared fresh food made with corn and wild greens. The cowboy tried to eat slowly, feeling strength return in small pieces. He asked the women for their stories, wanting to know who they truly were. The youngest spoke first, saying that she wanted peace more than anything. The middle said she believed strength and caution must live side by side. The oldest said she followed the signs of nature and trusted what the land revealed. Their voices formed a bond stronger than what any law forced, because it came from shared truth. For the next hours, the cowboy and the three women spoke softly about purpose, faith, and survival. None of them knew what the future held, and tension still lingered like a storm hovering without lightning. Their lives were no longer separate roads. They sat together inside a sacred space where fate waited quietly, ready to take shape once the cowboy healed enough to stand before the band and speak his truth. Night would return again soon, and with it, questions no one could answer yet. By the second day, the cowboy could sit up without feeling the world tilt sideways. Though the pain in his ribs still burned every time he breathed too deep, the three Apache women moved around the lodge with the same quiet rhythm. But he could feel something different now, like a thin line of worry running under every small act. When they ground herbs, their hands moved a little faster. When they stepped outside, they stayed gone a little longer, scouting the wind and the trees as if expecting trouble. He sensed that his presence, his wounded cowboy body lying under their roof, had stirred up more than the elders' calm words had revealed. Outside, among the oaks and rocky slopes, the rest of the small band had begun to talk. Some believed the women had done right when they saved his life. Others whispered of danger. They had seen what happened when soldiers and ranchers wanted something. The land remembered burned camps and broken promises. A stranger brought into the heart of their hidden place could mean that white men might come riding hard soon, following tracks, demanding answers. The sacred law protected the women from shame, but it could not stop bullets if angry men found them. A young Apache warrior named Lone Hawk stood on a ridge, watching the valley below, where distant dust sometimes rose in thin lines. He had known the middle woman since they were children. In his heart, he carried a quiet hope that someday he would speak to her family and ask to join his life with hers. When he heard that she and her two kinswomen had brought in a wounded cowboy, and that the old law of three saviors might tie them all together, his jaw tightened. To him, the law was meant to protect women from false blame, not to bind them to a man whose world had already taken so much from their people. He came down from the ridge and walked toward the lodge, his steps sharp, his bow across his shoulder. Near the door, he found the middle woman tending a small pot. Her eyes met his, and he could see conflict there. She respected him, trusted his skills as a hunter, but she would not back down from the choice she had made to save a life. They spoke in low tones, their words filled with history. He said the cowboy might bring riders to their door. She said leaving a man to bleed alone would stain their spirits in ways no law could clean. Lone Hawk answered that the earth also demanded they protect what little was left of their people. Inside the lodge, Cowboy could hear enough to sense tension. He did not know all the words, but he understood tone. He felt like a rock dropped into a calm stream, breaking the surface and changing the current. He thought back to the men who had chased him, rough cowhands with quick tempers. They had been waiting for an excuse to blame someone when horses went missing. Maybe the animals had simply wandered into breaks or been taken by real thieves. But it was easier to point fingers at a man who had no big ranch name behind him. Now that anger might be pushing west, leaving boot prints and plans behind. The oldest woman stepped inside and told him that some in their band were uneasy. She did not hide it. She believed truth gave more strength than soft lies. She explained again that by sacred law, when three women took a man in under their roof after saving his life, he became bound to them as their husband in the eyes of spirits once he was strong enough to stand and accept it. This bond meant protection, duty, and respect. It meant he could not treat them as lesser or walk away without facing consequences from the whole band. The law existed so no man could use their care and then cast them aside. The cowboy's heart pounded. Husband to three Apache women. It sounded to him like something out of old campfire stories, not real life. He tried to speak carefully, his voice low and plain. He said he had not asked for such a law and did not want to harm their standing among their people. The oldest woman replied that they had known the law when they lifted him from the dirt. They had chosen the path with open eyes. Now the question was not whether the law was real, but what kind of man he would be under it, as the day stretched on. A second conflict began to rise in the distance. A small group of riders moved slowly along the far foothills, following broken brush and faint tracks. Their leader, a tall ranch foreman with a gray mustache and cold eyes. Believed the cowboy had taken the missing horses or helped someone do it. He told the others that any man who ran when accused had something to hide. He did not talk about the way ranch hands sometimes turned on each other or how anger could cloud the facts. All he knew was that the owner wanted someone to blame. And the wounded man who had vanished into the wild made for an easy target? One of the younger riders in that group had once shared coffee and dry jokes with the cowboy near the bunkhouse fire. As he rode, he felt doubt nagging at him. He remembered the cowboy as a man who kept his word and worked harder than most. Still, he said nothing. The West taught young men to keep quiet when men above them spoke with guns at their sides. Yet the doubt stayed, a small ache that did not leave. Back at the Apache camp, evening fell, turning the sky the color of embers fading in a long line across the horizon. The three women gathered near the fire with the elder. Lone Hawk stood just outside the circle with a few other warriors. The cowboy tried to sit upright, propped against furs, listening. The elder spoke of the law again, reminding everyone that their people survived by holding tight to the ways of their fathers and mothers. If they let fear make them break sacred law, then they would be losing more than one man's fate. They would be cutting at the roots of their own tree. Yet he also warned that the land was changing. Soldiers, rail lines, and ranch fences pressed in from all sides. To ignore that pressure would be foolish. A path must be found where honor and survival walked together. He asked the cowboy to speak from his heart so that the band could hear his side. The air in the lodge grew heavy as all eyes turned toward the stranger. The cowboy cleared his throat. He told them about the ranch, about the missing horses, about how quick anger arose when property vanished. He admitted he had run not because he was guilty, but because he had seen what angry men did to those they blamed. He spoke of seeing Apache camps from a distance over the years, never knowing what life was like among them, only hearing hard talk from town men. He said that in his short time under their roof, he had seen more care and honor than he had seen in many saloons and bunkhouses. His voice shook when he said he did not want his trouble to fall on them. The oldest woman stepped forward. She told the band that the cowboy had shown gratitude and respect. He had not cursed them or tried to command them. He had asked for their stories and listened. The youngest woman spoke too, saying that when she looked into his eyes a few nights before, she had seen fear, but not cruelty. The middle one remained quiet, her eyes moving between Lone Hawk and the fire. Feeling her own heart caught between old dreams and new duty, Lone Hawk then spoke, his words cutting through the close air like a knife. He said he did not trust any man who came from lands where his people were hunted and pushed aside. He did not doubt that the women had acted with good hearts. But he questioned whether the spirits truly meant for them to bind themselves to a man who had not grown from their traditions. He feared that making the cowboy their sacred husband would open the door to more trouble, from both whites and from unrest inside their own band. Some nodded at his words, others looked away. The elder did not answer right away. He let silence sit with them. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the breath of those inside. Finally, he said that some conflicts were not meant to be settled in one meeting. He declared that the cowboy would remain under the women's care, but that no final choice about the marriage bond would be made until the next full moon. During that time, the band would watch his actions, and scouts would watch the hills. The delay did not end the tension. It stretched it tighter. The cowboy now understood that every move he made mattered. Each word he spoke, each sign of respect or temper, would weigh on the scale when the moon grew full. The three women felt the same strain, knowing that their futures were tied to how he walked through the coming days. Lone Hawk watched as well, his pride and worry fighting inside him. If the cowboy proved worthy, what would that mean for his own hopes as night deepened? A thin line of smoke rose far in the distance where the riders had made a small camp. They were closer now, reading the land, hunting for a sign of the wounded man and his trail. In the dark, coyotes lifted their voices, and the wind shifted just enough to carry a faint smell of that distant fire toward the Apache camp. The oldest woman raised her head, sensing something uneasy on the breeze. The cowboy lay back, staring at the moving shadows on the lodge walls. He could feel conflict tightening around him, like a lasso drawing in. The law of three saviors, the anger of the ranch foreman, the unease of warriors like Lone Hawk, the quiet strength of the three women who had saved him now, pulled his life in different directions. He did not know yet which force would win, or if he would even live long enough for the full moon to rise and bring judgment. Outside, under the watching stars, the land held its breath. The band did not know that riders were closing the distance. The riders did not know that a sacred law stood between them and the man they wanted. And inside the small lodge, for hearts that had never planned to be joined now, beat in a shared waiting. Each step forward promising no easy path, only deeper conflict that had yet to show its full shape. The days that followed felt long and heavy, like waiting for a storm that refused to show itself, but kept its thunder close. The cowboy regained more strength, though his ribs ached with every move, and his shoulders still felt tight as if a stone rested under the skin. He tried to help with small tasks around the lodge to show he was not there to be a burden. The three Apache women watched him closely, each studying him in a different way. The youngest noticed that he always thanked them softly and never reached for anything without asking. The middle one saw the quiet way he studied the land, almost as if asking permission from it with his eyes. The oldest understood that he carried weight deeper than his wounds, something he didn't speak about yet. One evening, as a soft red glow painted the sky, the cowboy stepped outside to gather firewood with slow steps. The youngest woman followed him so he wouldn't strain himself. While she watched, he paused and asked her how long she had lived in that hidden valley. She told him she had been born there, and that some of their people believed the land chose who could find it. She said it was not marked on any map, and that the valley closed its path to anyone whose intentions were wrong. He listened with respect, understanding that to them the land was not just soil and trees, but a living guardian at night. Drums could sometimes be heard from deeper inside the camp, where elders prayed for safety and guidance. The cowboy felt nervous every time he heard the steady rhythm, knowing that each beat carried a reminder that Judgment Day grew closer. The full moon was not far now. The law of three saviors still hung over him like a shadow. He did not know whether he would be asked to stay forever or be forced to leave. Worse, he feared the riders who followed his faint trail might be near enough to bring danger before anyone made a decision. Lone Hawk continued scouting at high points, often staring across the empty land as if trying to measure how far trouble traveled. Though he respected the elders' decision to wait until the full moon, he could not silence his own fears. He cared deeply for the middle woman and felt torn between trust and dread. The thought of her being tied to the cowboy through sacred law made his chest tighten. Not out of hate for the stranger, but because he believed fate had not chosen fairly. He worried that his people might lose something precious while trying to obey rules meant for older times. On the sixth day, signs of danger appeared. The scouts found faint hoof marks far below the valley. They reported to the elder that someone was tracking without rushing, moving with patience. It could have been hunters, but the marks carried the shape of horses shod with ranch nails, not wild Mustang hooves. The elder grew concerned. He ordered more watchful eyes on the hills and told every lodge to keep quiet fires at night. The cowboy heard the news when the middle woman told him in a steady voice, though her eyes betrayed her worry. He felt guilt strike him deep, like a branding iron pressed to the heart. He told her if he had the strength, he would leave to protect them, but she shook her head, saying the spirits would not forgive them if they let him die outside their care. That night the three women sat closer to the cowboy than before. Though they didn't say it, each seemed to sense that time was running short. The youngest whispered that the spirits sometimes tested people by bringing outsiders to change their path. The middle wondered if fate could bend without breaking. The oldest reminded them that the law was not only about duty, but also about justice. When the cowboy listened, he felt that these women were not bound by weakness, but by courage. It scared him more than any gun barrel he had seen, because courage brought choices that could not be undone. As day passed into another, tension climbed like rising smoke. The band walked with hushed voices, and no children played near the creek. Everyone looked toward the hills from time to time, searching for a sign of riders. The cowboy asked the women to teach him small things to show goodwill. They taught him how to tie bundles the Apache way, how to grind certain herbs, and how to understand when weather changed by reading clouds rather than listening to town rumors. The land seemed to accept him quietly, though no one said it out loud. Lone Hawk returned one afternoon with narrowed eyes. He stood before the elder and told him that he saw distant dust behind a ridge, too straight and steady to be caused by wind alone. The elder ordered silent movement only and prepared a plan. The band agreed that no one would act first. They would wait, hidden, ready to defend, but not invite battle. The cowboy felt a chill run through him because he knew ranch riders did not understand quiet diplomacy. He feared their anger would cloud their judgment, and that seeing an Apache settlement would worsen it. That evening, the sky darkened earlier than usual, as thick clouds formed like a curtain hiding the moon. The cowboy sat with the three women inside the lodge. Each of them seemed deep in thought. The youngest picked at a piece of dried hide nervously. The middle stared into the fire. The oldest listened to the wind as if it carried messages no one else could hear. The cowboy finally spoke, saying he could no longer let danger fall on them because of his unwanted trail. The oldest woman answered that running now would not erase the spirit's law. Their fates were already linked. If he left and was harmed, it would stain their honor. If he stayed, there might be trouble, but at least truth would face truth. Suddenly, a soft whistle traveled through the air from outside. It was a signal from scouts. The middle woman rushed out and returned, whispering that unknown men were approaching from the far side. They were not yet close enough to see the camp, but they were moving in a direction that could accidentally reveal the valley path if luck turned wrong. The cowboy's heartbeat hammered and sweat covered his palms. He knew the riders might not even care about fairness if they found him among the Apache. They might assume he had joined them, making him a target and them enemies. The elder gathered everyone near the central fire pit. He spoke with a calm but firm tone. He said they would send a small watch group to guide the riders away without revealing their presence unless they had no choice. He told the three women to stay inside with the cowboy. Lone Hawk volunteered to lead the watch group. The elder agreed but warned him not to act with anger. Lone Hawk nodded, though his eyes burned with protective fire. As they left, the valley seemed to stop breathing. The three women sat close to the cowboy, and he felt their fear mixing with his own. The youngest whispered a soft prayer for peace. The middle said that fate was almost ready to test them. The oldest placed a steady hand on the cowboy's shoulder and said that in moments like these, man's truth showed clearly. Time moved slowly. Outside, faint footsteps and distant murmurs passed through the trees. Minutes felt like hours. The cowboy held his breath more than once, expecting voices to rise or weapons to clash. Then, far away, a shout echoed through the wind. No words could be understood, but it didn't sound like a greeting. The women exchanged worried looks. A few moments later, the earth carried the rumble of hooves. They were not running wild, but moving with uncertain pace, like riders unsure whether they had found a path or been tricked into one. The cowboy's stomach twisted. The youngest woman leaned near the lodge door, listening. The middle placed her hand near her knife, out of instinct. The oldest whispered that whatever happened next would shape all their futures. When a sudden silence returned outside, it felt even louder than noise. Then a single voice shouted from the hills, carried by wind. The cowboy recognized it. It belonged to one of the ranch riders, calling his name in a questioning tone. The women froze. The cowboy closed his eyes, knowing the moment he feared most had arrived, and somewhere near the ridge, with the full moon only 2 nights away, 2 sides stood close enough to change the fate of everyone in the valley with a single decision, a single word, or a single act. The cowboy knew he could not hide any longer. If the riders found him while he remained silent, it would make him look guilty, and it would put the Apache people in danger. He pushed himself higher on his elbows, gritting his teeth as pain cut through his ribs, and asked the 3 women to help him stand. They insisted he was not ready, but he told them that a man must face his truth, even if his legs shake under him. The oldest studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. With their help he stood, though he leaned heavily on the middle woman, breathing unevenly as they stepped out of the lodge and into the dim light that hovered over the valley like a quiet warning. The wind smelled of dust and distant horse sweat, and somewhere above, an owl called its lonely cry, a few steps away. The elder, Lone Hawk, and 2 guards stood hidden behind brush and rock, watching the approaching riders who now gathered on a rise above the valley entrance, unsure if they had found a hidden place or only a strange pocket in the land. One of the riders called the cowboy's name again, louder this time, followed by a second voice that sounded more impatient. The cowboy signaled to the elder that he would speak. Lone Hawk stepped closer, ready to pull him back if things turned dangerous. The 3 women remained behind him, forming a silent line of support, their faces steady as stone shaped by water. The cowboy raised his voice and answered the call, saying he was alive but wounded and that he was not alone. The riders jerked around at the sound of his voice. They rode a few yards closer until they could see him standing near the trees, pale but upright. Their leader looked shocked at first, then suspicious when he noticed Apache figures beside him. He shouted that the cowboy must return immediately to answer for the missing horses. The cowboy replied that he had no part in the theft and that he had fled because he feared false judgment and angry hands. The young rider who had once shared fire with him spoke up, saying he believed the cowboy's words but asked why he had vanished into Apache land if he was innocent. The cowboy explained that falling from his horse had left him broken and bleeding, and that he would have died if not for those who chose mercy over fear. The riders murmured among themselves, unsure if they should trust what they heard or follow their leader's will. The elder then stepped forward, speaking calmly. He told the riders that no man should be claimed like cattle, and that accusations needed truth, not anger. He said their law had protected the cowboy's life, and that by spirit rule, they had taken responsibility for him. The ranch foreman grew frustrated, saying white law would handle the matter. Lone Hawk stepped forward, reminding him that this was not white land, and that their people had law long before any fence had been hammered into the earth. For a tense moment, everyone fell quiet, waiting to see if anger or reason would move next. The cowboy took a breath and turned toward the ranch foreman. He said he would go with them if 2 conditions were met. First, that no harm would come to the Apache band for helping him. Second, that he would be judged by facts, not fear. After a long silence, the ranch foreman agreed, though his voice carried stiffness instead of grace. The younger rider stepped down from his saddle and walked a bit closer, raising an open hand to show peace. He offered his word that he would speak for fairness and would not let lies replace truth. The elder accepted this, and the 3 women lowered their weapons, though their eyes stayed firm. The cowboy then turned to the women and thanked them, saying that his life would forever carry their courage. He said he did not know what fate the sacred law would have chosen, but that his respect for them was real. The youngest started to cry softly, not out of weakness, but from fear of losing someone she had grown to care for. The middle held her hand, and the oldest told the cowboy that every life path left footprints, and that he would not walk away empty. Lone Hawk looked at the cowboy for a long time. He reached out his hand and placed it on the cowboy's shoulder, not in threat, but in final measure of character. He said that though they came from different worlds, he saw no cowardice in the cowboy's heart. The cowboy answered that he hoped their paths would cross again without tension standing between them. The elder then announced that, since the cowboy chose to leave with his own voice, the law of 3 saviors would end without dishonor. The women bowed their heads respectfully, accepting the elder's decision, and the cowboy bowed his head back to them. Honoring what they had done, the riders helped the cowboy mount a spare horse, placing him gently so his ribs would not break open again. Before he left, the 3 women approached him one by one. The youngest placed a small carved stone in his hand, saying it would remind him that life sometimes grows from places where pain once lay. The middle touched his arm and told him that truth was stronger than rumor if a man held it with steady hands. The oldest told him that even if he walked far beyond the valley, he carried a piece of their story inside him. Their words sank deep into him, forming a quiet promise that he would not forget. As the group began the slow ride back toward the ranch lands, the cowboy turned to see the Apache band watching from the shadows, silent and proud. He felt the weight of everything that had happened settle in his chest. When they reached the ranch, A search party had already found the missing horses miles away near a broken fence. It proved that the cowboy had been innocent all along. The ranch foreman apologized with stiff words, but the cowboy did not ask for revenge or payment. He only asked them to remember that justice can be lost quickly if men stop listening. The young rider kept his word and spoke strongly for the cowboy. He helped convince the ranch owner that anger had nearly caused harm to innocent people. The cowboy then chose to leave the ranch world behind for a time. He wanted peace and needed space to heal his spirit. As months passed, he lived near a quiet river, working with traders and travelers, saving money, but carrying memories deeper than any pocket could hold. 1 year later, he returned to the hidden valley, bringing gifts not as payment but as respect. The Apache band welcomed him peacefully, and the 3 women met him near the same creek where he had first been found. They spoke as friends, no longer bound by fear, misunderstanding, or old shadows. The cowboy thanked them again and told them that their courage had changed the course of his life, teaching him honor beyond words. The women smiled gently, knowing the land had made its choice long ago. The cowboy left the valley once more, but never stopped carrying their teachings. He told others that not all stories of cowboys and Apache people needed sorrow or hate, that the truth of the land was bigger than any border, language, or saddle. In the end, he understood that survival meant more than breathing. It meant learning, respecting, and choosing peace, even when tension tried to write another ending. The valley remained hidden, untouched by riders or war, and those who lived there continued to honor their sacred law. Knowing that mercy had once written a story that might live longer than any fence, map, or trail,